Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Security Expo series of podcasts. And today we are speaking with Scott O'Driscoll, the National Security Manager for the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. Scott, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So, Scott, you and I have known each other for quite some time now. You were a contributor for Security Solutions way back in the early days, and participated in various different bits and pieces that we've been doing. So for those people who may not be familiar with you, tell us a little bit about your background, because your journey to your current position is not the typical journey.
So initially when I left school, I joined the Commonwealth Bank. Worked in there for 14 months, was a teller. Worked my way up to trading bank examiner. And then decided that I wanted to be a carpenter.
Right.
With the goal of being a builder.
Okay.
But for the life of me, I could not get into that trade. So I had one of my brother's friends told me about a position as a locksmith. And I thought, well, that's be working with wood, and it's probably as close as I'm going to get, and at least it gets me out of a teller's booth.
Yep.
So I applied for that job and got the apprenticeship with Eastwood Lock and Key Service many years ago now.
Yep.
Did my apprenticeship there and was kind of running the service department in my first year, but there was only, like a couple of us in that business, a couple of tradies and an apprentice. So I then applied for a job at Independent Locksmiths, got that job there and worked there for about 20 years.
Yep.
And in that time, I decided that I wanted to be a consultant. I'd kicked off with one of the co-owners their electronic security business at Independent. So I got to learn about cameras and alarms and access control way back when access control was basically a NIDAC copad.
Yep.
And cameras were working on multiplexes and things like that. So very old school. So once I'd done that, I then decided I wanted to be a consultant. So I went to uni at the University of Western Sydney for 3 years, mostly on the weekends, obviously, because I still work a full-time job. And then I got a job applied for and got a job with Business Risks International.
Okay.
A consultant / operations manager for their guarding state ops.
Yep.
So that's kind of introduced me to that world there.
Was that with Julian Talbot, or was that back?
No, it was with Mitch Jeffrey, who was the owner of the show then.
Yep.
So I did that I worked there for 4 and a bit years. Then I got a job with IBP Consulting.
Yep.
Worked there for another 4 years, and that's where I started to do the design work and the risk assessments and those types of things.
Yep.
That I'd sort of learned at uni and taught myself as far as the electronic security stuff is concerned, along with the help of a lot of really good salespeople in the industry. That if you asked them a question, like if you needed to know something, you could pick up the phone. Paul Gregory is one of those people. I will mention his name. Very good man. He helped me a lot, and they taught me a lot. Those guys provided me with documentation, showed me how things worked. It's really good crew, good time.
Yep.
Back in those days to be learning your craft, and then got me through to the stage where I was designing for jails and hospitals and government departments and type 1 security systems, some really high-end stuff, military bases, things like that.
Yep.
Yes, and then I did that for it was about 12 years. Then I decided that I might try the other side of the coin and see what it's like in corporate world.
Yep.
And got a job at Macquarie Bank. It was actually with CBRE, but they were embedded in the Macquarie Bank account, or I was embedded in the Macquarie Bank account. as their global security operations and risk manager,
Okay.
which is a title that sounds a lot bigger than what the job actually was. It was more about managing guards and their security systems globally, but not a lot of the risk work, I suppose, was in that. I mean, we did some risk assessments, but it wasn't a hell
Yep.
of a lot of stuff. That was mainly done by their global security team,
Okay.
who I work very closely with and develop some good relationships. And then it comes to my job now. So um, one of the fellows I worked with at Macquarie said, "Hey, look, there's this job being advertised. It's got your name all over it. You should apply." So I did, and I got it.
Wow. That's quite the journey from bank teller to locksmith and now national security manager for one of the biggest broadcasters in Australia. What does your current role involve, sort of on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I've got a very small team. We're very lean. We have some contract guards. I think it's roughly about 55 across the country.
Yep.
So I've got one of my team who manages those guards. We obviously have a lot of incidents that occur. Sometimes the ABC can be very controversial in their reporting. We get a lot of fixated persons that we need to deal with and manage. And when I say manage, it's basically monitor and assist the people that are the subject of their fixation.
Yep.
And sometimes that can be a reporter or a journalist, or it can just be the ABC in general.
Yep.
Sometimes it's because they hate us. Sometimes because they love us just a little bit too much.
Yep.
And so either one can have consequences
Yep.
for the persons that are the subject of their fixation. So that's an interesting part of the job. The rest is we do a lot of design. So if we open a new studio somewhere, or if we refurb the studio or part thereof of one of our buildings, we'll be engaged by the project team to design the security setup for those areas or that particular regional site. We also have a number of sites internationally that we also have oversight of. We're in the process of doing some work on those at the moment. One of our biggest projects that we've done, which we've just completed, was to upgrade all of our security systems nationally, which involved getting us all onto one intruder detection access control platform,
Right.
one CCTV platform, and bringing that all back to our National Security Operations Centre.
Okay.
It's a massive job, and considering that we really only had visibility of a couple of sites from CCTV, and now we have visibility of all of them.
Right.
Some of our sites were hard key locked, didn't even have any access control or intruder detection in them.
Yep.
Now they all do. So,
So you've spent a fair bit of time developing a single pane of glass solution across all of the sites.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
So great for the control room operators because now they've got a GUI for the access control intruder detection and a GUI for the CCTV, and they're integrated. So it really has been a game changer for us.
Okay. And, you mentioned a fair bit of your time is sort of spent dealing with fixated persons. Is that the kind of thing that you have to do any extra training for? Like, do you have a background or have you done study in the area of psychology and behavioral analysis, or do you have experts that come in and help with that side of it?
Did a bit of work on that in uni. There was some, because we did intelligence I did intelligence and investigations in uni as well. So after I did that course, I decided I'd become a private investigator. So I went and got my license, and that allowed me to do some work on things like that. So it's basically first-hand experience.
Yep.
As a consultant back in BRI, we used to do work for Network 10.
Yep.
and we used to deal with those fixated persons in that when we did that work for them. And we used to have a fella that we'd send like what do you call him? It was a psychologist, but a criminal psychologist. I'm not sure if that's the right word.
Forensic psychologist?
Not really. No, I think it was criminal psychologist. Anyway, he was very good, and we'd send him stuff, and he'd do his analysis and send it back. So that was something that I had to read his reports, and
Yep.
I sort of, picked up a lot of what he was doing from that. Pointed me to the signs of fixation, pointed me to the signs of what could be, I guess, to develop the risk based focus on how to assess these people and determine whether or not they have the capability and capacity to carry out any threats that they've made, or whether they were just keyboard warriors that I didn't have to worry about.
Yep.
And I guess through experience and doing it for so long, you pick up on these things, and you see you see the red flags when they're there.
Yep.
And if they're not, you sort of go, oh, no, you've got nothing to worry about with this person. So far, I haven't got it wrong. So touch wood, that continues.
Fair enough. So for you, having sort of gone into this space a number of years ago now, what are some of the biggest changes you're seeing in your role from a security point of view?
Now it's, initially it was going sort of converging with IT was a big change, obviously, for the industry and for what we do. Going from analog to digital was huge. Significant upgrades in CCTV and what they could do for us, and the connectivity around the globe, and how quickly you can look at your phone and you can be looking at images straight away.
Yep.
So those would be game changers. And now we're sort of getting into the AI stuff. And whilst that's in its infancy, it scares me, but it also excites me.
Yep. When you say you're getting into AI, if insofar as you can talk about it, what sorts of things are you looking at in the AI space?
We haven't really stepped into that area yet, but I'm just sort of, you go back further and you're talking about facial rec and stuff like that. But I'm sort of going a little bit further than that and when I say things scare me, I'm talking about deep fakes and that might mean. The fact that voice recognition can now be duplicated. There's lots of different things that, again, like raising red flags for me.
Yeah,
but I haven't really worked out what the benefits. I'm sure there will be some. What they're going to mean to us. I suppose it will be maybe about that kind of facial rec stuff and being able to identify persons of interest quickly and easily, through CCTV and maybe through voice recognition, depending on how what comes through.
Yep.
How the threats are made.
You bring up a really interesting point about the deep fakes. As the national security manager for one of Australia's largest broadcasters, I suppose, both radio, television and streaming, you have a high propensity or a high risk profile, I guess, for people misrepresenting or misusing what's being put out through your radio, your television and your streaming services. From what you've seen and what you're studying at the moment, is there an effective way to deal with deep fakes other than afterwards having, the likes of a Paul Barry on Media Watch coming out and going, well, that wasn't us and we can point to these 5 reasons why it wasn't us? I mean, do you have a strategy for how you intend to try and tackle that moving forward?
I don't, but I hope our cyber team does.
Right.
The idea is to use AI to identify AI.
Right, which it's notoriously bad at the moment.
Yes, but it will improve. So that's what they're telling me is the way to tackle this stuff.
Yep.
And because it's all in its infancy now, I mean that the bad guy's going to be a step ahead of us. They generally are.
Yep.
and we're always playing catch up with them because they're looking for solutions, and we're waiting for them to, wait for something to pop up. It's very hard to be proactive around that space when the technology's new.
Yep. Have you had any instances yet where anything that's supposedly ABC property has turned up as, alleged, video material, but it's been faked?
I'm not sure about video material, but we've definitely had fake, social media accounts made up that have used a lot of material
Right.
that is real, but the account is completely fake,
Yep.
and that's caused, and it's usually for some sort of like grabbing scam of some description. So they're asking for $1 for this and $1 for that.
Yeah. Okay.
So it all adds up.
And if there are, let's use COVID as an example, if there are people who are choosing to misreport information around things like COVID and they're using clips from the ABC to do that, but misrepresenting what the talent from ABC have been saying, is the onus on, the ABC or your department to come out and say, hey, we've identified this and it's not real? Or is it just a case of, look, people have to do their own due diligence? Or how does that work for you?
For me, it's not part of my role to do that. Like I said, we've got a cyber team. We've got a social media team
Right.
that do that type of work. When things get nasty and people are making threats, that's when it comes to us.
Right.
It's kind of my role is to liaise with the police and deal with the bad guys that are actually threatening to kill or hurt someone,
Yep.
or do damage to ABC assets,
Yep.
because we're kind of in the protective security role on the physical security side.
Okay.
But we do obviously have meetings with those guys and talk about what we're doing, what they're doing, what their strategies are, how we might be able to assist them, and work together to hopefully mitigate our risk as far as that sort of stuff is concerned. And we've got to protect the physical assets anyway. So we're talking about the comms rooms and where people are going to get in that don't come in through through cable.
Yep. Okay.
Insider threats, things like that as well.
Yeah.
Not that we have much of that going on in the ABC. Our threats tend to be external.
Okay. And given the growing global uncertainty at the moment, I mean, we had the Ukraine conflict kick off back in what's been a couple of years now, and then we've now got this Israel conflict going on against Hamas. I imagine in those sorts of things, you have people with boots on the ground reporting from the war zones. As the national security manager, is it your responsibility to conduct risk reviews on those sorts of sites before people are sent out, or how does that work?
The crews conduct their own risk assessments, and anything that's rated over medium is sent to us to have a look at. And we're basically just dotting the I's and crossing the T's, making sure that they've got everything covered off. We might pick some gaps in what they're doing. I always like everybody to have a plan B when they go somewhere. So plan A is this, what's your plan B? Is usually what I say.
Yep.
What if things go sideways? The crews that go in have been doing it for a long time.
Yep.
I'm not going to tell them how to suck eggs, but it's just good to have somebody else there to put their eyes over it, have a second set of eyes, look at it and say, okay, well, yeah, that looks pretty good to me. Or sometimes I'd get them to adjust their risk rating because it's either too low or too high.
Yep.
And I don't have the final say in whether or not they're deployed.
Right.
That's usually the role in those sort of areas, in the high risk areas. It's usually the MD that makes those decisions.
Okay. And if you've got someone new and young coming up through the ranks who's looking like they want to do that kind of thing, do you provide them with hostile environment training, or is that something that they need to go out and source themselves? How does that work?
No, we anybody that's going to be deployed in those sort of environments does heat. So hostile environment awareness training. Um, that's managed by news usually, or whoever. So we've got news and content that do most of the stuff that goes internationally, that puts
Yep.
boots on the ground internationally. So they organise that themselves. Where we get engaged to assess the providers
Yep.
and make sure that they've got all their accreditations and insurances and things like that. Because I now I was in sitting in property, or the security team was in property. We've now moved to risk, so we get
Right.
a little bit more involved in that stuff than we used to.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, that's a little bit of a change for us. It's happened recently.
That's okay. So, because I'm aware that we're sort of coming to the end of our allotted time, from your perspective in your role, you've already mentioned AI. What do you see as being the big challenges on the horizon for you over the next probably 2 or 3 years?
Thinking about retirement. Um, I think the way the world is at the moment, that's going to be an ongoing challenge for us. We've already had a lot of protest activities on our sites and targeted malicious damage, vandalism,
Yep.
as a result of what's happening internationally and the way it's being reported. Because apparently we're not telling the truth, although I I call, pardon my French, bullshit on that. But
Yep.
anyway, that's just my opinion.
Yep.
Um, yeah, you know, that's probably what I see as being the most challenging thing is the geopolitical environment and what impact that's going to have on us,
Yep.
when it's reported. If people don't like what they're reading or don't like what they're seeing on TV or hearing on the radio, and they had something to say about it. And these days, and COVID really kicked it all off when everybody was locked up, right? Locked down.
Yep.
That created a boom in online keyboard warrior attacks, uh, which has not gone away. Even
Yep.
though everybody's free to do whatever they want, they've sort of got into that pattern and they've stuck with it.
Yep.
Social media has also had a very big impact, obviously.
Yep.
The ease in which you can reach somebody now, that's troublesome sometimes.
Yep.
It has a very, people, we've had incidents where people have sent things to us by whatever means, emails, social media, whatever. Um, and we've acted on that because we're zero tolerance when it comes to when threats are made. So we take that straight to the police, and mark my words, we will report them.
Yep.
And people have been arrested, and when they've the police said, "Why did you do it?" I didn't think anybody would read it. Well, if you send somebody an email, you post something on their chat on social media, of course they're going to read it.
Yeah.
You'd be silly to think they didn't, and that it won't be reported, because it will be.
Yeah. And of course, your journey, as we mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, is a somewhat unusual and remarkable one. I was going to say, from your perspective, you did this sort of, in the earlier part of the 2000s when the world was a little bit different. Do you think it's still possible for someone to replicate that journey? If I'm a guard on a site, or I'm a locksmith working somewhere, or I'm a security installation technician, do you think it's still possible to sort of, go through and change tacks and end up in the upper echelons of management within the security industry?
Absolutely. If you've got the drive and ambition.
And
One of my team members was a guard. He worked his way up to be a controller at a very high security site. I'm not going to say where it was, but he then applied for a job as a supervisor in our building at Ultimo for the guards. I recognised his abilities and his talent and offered him a job. He's now my national physical security manager.
okay, so what advice would you offer to those people who are wanting to make a career in the more senior ranks of the industry?
I think as I said, you've got to work. Nothing comes easily,
Yep.
and um, do as much learning as you possibly can. Network as much as you possibly can.
Yep.
Speak to everybody in the industry that you possibly can. You work out who's got it upstairs and who doesn't,
Yep.
and yeah, just never stop learning.
Yep.
And you'll eventually, your doors will open.
Yeah.
That's what happened with me. I never thought back in the day when I was an apprentice locksmith that I'd end up being, what is basically the head of security for the ABC. So, yeah, things can happen, but they don't necessarily happen quickly. That's something for the young ones to take note of. They seem to think you can earn the big money and get the big jobs, you know, within a few years of leaving school. Even if you go to uni for 4, 5, 6 years after leaving school, doesn't mean you're going to walk into the highest paying jobs.
No.
Still work your way up.
Just touching on your time at university briefly, you mentioned you went from sort of, installing locks on doors to eventually designing prison systems, security systems for high security detention facilities like prisons and military sites. Did you find that your time at university prepared you for that, or were you having to sort of, seek out a lot of information from peers in the industry? And at the point where you got to the stage where you were doing that, did you feel prepared, or were you sort of thinking a bit of, oh, holy crap, imposter syndrome, I don't really know if I can do this, I hope I don't screw it all up?
I guess there's a bit of that in the background when you start working on that kind of thing. But, as I said, there's always people out there who are willing to help in the industry. That's what I was talking about. Networking is very important. And if you're working for a company, there's always your co-workers
Yeah.
that have had the experience that are going to help you out. And things are never going to go out the door unless they're checked and double checked to make sure they're right. And
Yeah.
they definitely point you in the right direction if they think you've got it wrong. Well, that was kind of a side gig for me. My main thing was risk. I really love working in risk management.
Yeah.
That was what I mentioned Mitch Jeffrey before, and I owe him because he taught me. He made me understand what risk, how to do risk.
Yeah.
I did it at uni, and I still didn't get it until he sat me down and explained it to me.
Yeah.
And then it was like a light came on.
Yep.
And I went, wow, okay, now I get it.
Yeah.
And that just made my life so much easier.
And there's obviously been a lot written around risk, and we have here in Australia some of the world's leading experts on risk, guys who have, been instrumental in writing international standards for risk between, the Jason Browns of the world and the Julian Talbots of the world and the Mitch Jeffreys of the world and people like that. Do you think now, having had some years of experience in your role, that the international standards around risk are sufficient enough for someone to be able to look at those and go, yep, okay, I get it, I can use this to do my job? Or do you think that that's really just the beginning and you need to go out and have discussions and do a lot more digging before you can really get your head around it?
There's life experience, definitely. I mean, the longer you do it, the better at it you become. Look at, you've got the international standard, which is ISO 31,000, right?
Yep.
I still like the old Australian standard. What was it, 4360, I think?
Yep. Sounds about right.
That's the one I like. I still kind of work around that more so than the ISO one, but there's all different ways of doing the assessments now. Where you got the bow tie risk assessments, and this I just prefer the old school, and it works. If it's not broken, why fix it? Kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of what I lean to when I'm doing risk. But it's the more experience you've got in dealing with it, the better you will be at it.
Yeah.
And that's just because of your life experience.
And I guess, you're always going to make mistakes and you want to learn from them. Just try not to make them too costly.
Exactly. Mistakes end up being a problem for somebody and that they get hurt or whatever, that's another risk that you face doing the role that this type of job.
Yeah.
Again, fortunately, I'm touching wood, I haven't experienced any of that. So I guess I've been lucky. There's a bit of luck involved in these things as well, I suppose.
For sure. All right, Scott. Well,
luck and a bit of good management.
That's it. Well, look, thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure chatting to you. If people want to make contact, what's the best way to find you?
Probably email me, O'Driscoll Scott. So my name, basically backwards. No, sorry, there's a full stop in between there. So O'Driscoll, full stop, Scott. No apostrophe in the O'Driscoll at abc.net.au.
And can they find you on LinkedIn?
They certainly can.
All right, fantastic. Well, look, Scott, thanks again for your time, and we really appreciate having a chat with us.
No worries. Thank you.